You are not bad at conversation. You are allergic to low information noise. And the reason matters because if you mislabel it as shyness or social anxiety, you will keep trying to fix the wrong thing and you will keep feeling broken in rooms where nothing is actually wrong with you. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward 1,000 subscribers, and if this kind of psychology is your thing, subscribing genuinely helps the channel reach people who need it. And if you want the algorithm to keep showing you work that is actually useful, hitting like helps more than people realize. All right, back to the uncomfortable part. You have felt this. Someone starts talking to you, and within 20 seconds you can already predict the entire exchange. Weather, weekend, traffic, a tiny complaint, a polite laugh, and something inside you tightens, not because you hate people, but because your brain is watching a predictable script run and it feels like your time is being converted into nothing. Most people think this is introversion. That is not wrong, but it is shallow. What is actually happening is closer to a mismatch in how you price attention. Attention is not just focus. Attention is a scarce currency your nervous system uses to manage threat, opportunity, and meaning. Every social interaction forces your brain to do 3 expensive jobs at the same time. Track the other person, track yourself, and track the invisible rules of the situation. Eye contact, timing, tone, facial muscles, turn-taking, when to laugh. What counts as too much honesty? What counts as rude? That is a lot of computation. Small talk asks you to spend that computation on content that has almost no informational payoff. It is like running a high-end graphics card to display a blank spreadsheet. Now here is where it gets interesting. Small talk is not primarily about exchanging facts. It is a calibration ritual. People use it to measure safety, similarity, status, and mood without directly admitting they are measuring those things. It is social sonar. A few harmless pings to see what comes back. So when you prefer silence, you are often rejecting the ritual, not the person. And because most people confuse the ritual with connection, they interpret your silence as rejection of them. That is why this topic creates so much friction. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine 2 strangers in an elevator. One says, "Cold out today." On the surface, it is meaningless. Underneath, it is a low-risk bid. Are you friendly? Are you stable? Are you going to attack me socially? Are you going to make this awkward? If you respond with a small smile and a simple, "Yeah, it is," you just signaled, "I am safe. I understand the rules. I will not create problems in the next 20 seconds." If you stay silent, you might be thinking, "I do not want to pretend." But the other person's nervous system hears, "I cannot read you." And unreadable equals risk. That leads to the first novel insight I want you to hold on to. Your preference for silence is often a preference for reducing mutual uncertainty, not increasing it. Because small talk can actually increase uncertainty for certain minds. Here is how. Some people are pattern sensitive. Your brain does not just hear words, it hears motives. You automatically scan for what the interaction is really about. Is this person trying to bond, trying to impress, trying to extract, trying to sell, trying to test me? And when the content is vague, your predictive system has too many possible interpretations. That creates cognitive load. Silence, on the other hand, collapses the number of interpretations. It is clean. It gives your brain fewer moving parts to model. That can feel relaxing, even intimate, even when no one says anything. Think about sitting next to someone you trust while both of you do your own thing. No performance, no guessing, just co-regulation. That is not loneliness, that is safety. But if that is true, why do some people thrive on small talk? because they are using it as a low-cost way to get data. For them, the ritual is not expensive. They run it automatically, good like background software. For you, it is foreground. It costs you. And that brings us to the second insight. People who prefer silence often have a higher social precision setting. In predictive processing terms, your brain is constantly predicting what will happen next and updating based on error. Precision is how much weight you give to the error signal. If your precision is high, tiny social mismatches feel loud. A delayed laugh, a forced smile, a slightly wrong tone. You notice it. You feel it. Your nervous system treats it like important information. Small talk is full of tiny mismatches because it is full of micro-performances. Polite exaggerations, fake enthusiasm, controlled honesty. If your precision is high, that environment feels like sitting near a fluorescent light you cannot ignore. Other people do not even hear the buzzing. You cannot stop hearing it. So you retreat into silence, not because you cannot do social life, but because you can do it too well. You detect too much. Now watch what happens when we apply this to the exact moment you start to feel trapped. Someone asks, "So what do you do?" That sounds like curiosity. Often it is not. Often it is a fast classification attempt. They want to place you in a box so they know what level of respect to give you, how to talk to you, whether you are useful, whether you are similar. If you are sensitive to status dynamics, that question feels invasive. You feel the sorting algorithm behind it, and you start guarding yourself. This is why you might prefer silence. It is the only way to stop feeding the sorting algorithm. And here is the third insight, and it is the one most people never hear. Silence is a status move, but not in the way you think. We assume talkative equals confident, quiet equals insecure. That is a cultural superstition. In many social systems, the higher status person speaks less because they do not need to constantly prove they are here. They can afford pauses. They can afford to let other people fill the space. But the twist is this. If you are silent without signaling warmth, people do not read it as high status. They read it as judgment, or contempt, or threat. Because again, unreadable equals risk. So the game is not talk more. The game is make your silence legible. Notice the pattern here. The problem is not silence. The problem is ambiguous silence. Silence that other people cannot interpret. There is a concept in social neuroscience called mentalizing, the ability to infer what others are thinking and feeling. Most small talk is basically a mutual mentalizing hack. You narrate small, safe pieces of yourself so the other person can predict you. When you skip that, you force them to mentalize harder. Some people enjoy that. Most people feel stressed by it. So if you have ever been told you are intimidating, this is often what they mean. Not that you are aggressive, that you are expensive to read. And before you start blaming yourself, I want to flip the frame. Because there is a deeper layer most people miss. Small talk is not neutral. It is a training system. It trains you to be agreeable on command, to perform emotional microservices, to produce facial expressions and sounds that smooth the environment. It is social lubrication, yes, but it is also social compliance practice. If you grew up in a home where you had to monitor mood, where you had to keep the peace, where you had to say the right thing at the right time, your nervous system may interpret small talk as a request to go back into that role, the manage everyone role, the be easy role. No wonder you would rather be silent. Silence is the first boundary your body learned. Now stay with me, because this next part recontextualizes everything. The reason silence feels so good to you might not be that you are introverted. It might be that you have a stronger drive for coherence than most people. Coherence is when what you feel, what you think, what you say, and what you do line up. Small talk often forces incoherence. You say, "That is so interesting," when it is not. You say, "We should do this again," when you do not mean it. You laugh when nothing is funny. Yes, you nod when you disagree. If your brain is tuned toward coherence, those tiny lies feel like sand in your mouth. They create internal friction. And over time, your system learns a simple equation: conversation equals self-betrayal. Silence becomes moral relief. But there is a catch. If you let that equation harden, you will start confusing coherence with isolation. You will start thinking that any social ritual is fake, that any smoothing is lying, and that is not true. This is nuanced but important. A ritual can be empty, or it can be a container. In the same way that a handshake is not deep but still meaningful, small talk can be a container for safety. It is not meant to be profound. It is meant to lower the cost of being near each other. The mistake is expecting it to deliver intimacy. It is not intimacy. It is entry. So the real question becomes, why does entry feel like a tax to you? Here is one answer that lands hard: because your attention is already overcommitted. A lot of people who prefer silence are running a high baseline cognitive load. Overthinking, planning, analysing, worrying, or simply processing the world intensely. When your brain is already near capacity, small talk is not light. It is one more tab open. You can test this. On days when you sleep well, eat well, and have solitude, small talk becomes more tolerable. Not enjoyable, but tolerable. On days when you are depleted, it becomes unbearable. That tells you it is not purely personality. It is bandwidth. And there is another layer. Some people have a stronger orientation toward depth because their reward system is calibrated differently. Dopamine is not just pleasure, it is salience. It marks what is worth paying attention to. If your system assigns low salience to predictable social scripts, you will feel understimulated and irritated, not bored in a cute way, bored in a starving way. This is why silence can feel richer than chatter. In silence, your brain can generate its own salience. You think, you notice, you connect dots. That is internally rewarding. But in shallow conversation, your brain is trapped in externally imposed low salience input. It is like being forced to eat plain crackers when you crave protein. Now, mid-video, here is the surge, the part that actually changes how you live. The preference for silence is not one trait. It is 3 different mechanisms that look identical from the outside. 1. Sensory and cognitive cost. Talking costs you more than it costs others. 2. Coherence drive. Yet you dislike performing emotions you do not feel. 3. Threat modeling. You pick up on status, motives, and subtext, so vague talk feels like walking through fog. If you do not know which of these is driving you in a specific moment, you cannot fix the friction. You either force yourself to socialize and burn out, or you isolate and get lonely. Both feel bad. But if you can identify the mechanism, you can choose an intelligent response. Let me make it practical, without turning it into generic advice. If the issue is cost, you do not need to become more social. You need to reduce processing load. You can do that by narrowing the channel. Walk side by side instead of face to face. Do an activity while talking. Shorten exposure time. Talk in smaller groups. Or your brain does better when it does not have to track 10 faces and 50 microsignals. If the issue is coherence, you do not need to talk more. You need to talk more honestly, but in a socially readable way. There is a difference between honesty and bluntness. "I am a little quiet today, but I like being here," is honest and readable. It tells the other nervous system what your silence means. That single sentence prevents the misinterpretation spiral. If the issue is threat modeling, the solution is not to force small talk. It is to move the interaction from fog to structure. Ask one real question early, not deep therapy talk, just real. What has been taking up most of your attention lately? Or what are you working on right now that matters to you? People who live on scripts will dodge. People who have substance will light up. You just created a filter without being rude. Now here is the synthesis, the pattern behind the patterns. You prefer silence over small talk because silence preserves agency over your inner state. Small talk is not just words. It is an invitation into a shared regulation system. You are syncing breathing, tone, rhythm, and mood with someone else. That can be pleasant when there is trust and mutual respect. But when the interaction is shallow, you are syncing with a system that is optimizing for social smoothness. Not truth, not depth, not meaning. Your nervous system senses that and resists. Silence is your way of saying, I will not outsource my state to a low-quality signal. So the mental model I want you to leave with is this. Treat conversation like a bandwidth negotiation. Every interaction has a bit rate. Small talk is low bit rate, each but high overhead. Deep talk is high bit rate, often with lower overhead because it is coherent. Silence is zero bit rate, almost zero overhead, and surprisingly high intimacy when there is safety. Your job is not to become a different person. Your job is to match the mode to the context and make it legible. That means sometimes you use small talk as a key, not a home. A key gets you through a door. It is not where you live, and sometimes you use silence as a signal of comfort, not distance. But you must label it because other people cannot read your internal world. So here is a challenge that will change the next week of your life if you actually do it. The next time you go quiet around someone, ask yourself, which mechanism is active right now? Am I depleted? Am I craving coherence? Or am I sensing fog and threat? Then do one small and precise thing. If you are depleted, shorten the interaction. If you crave coherence, speak one honest sentence that explains your quiet. If you sense fog, ask one structured question that upgrades the signal. Notice what happens, not in theory, in your body, in the other person, in the entire vibe of the moment. Because when you understand this, your silence stops being a problem to solve and becomes a tool you can aim. And that brings us back to the first sentence. You are not bad at conversation. You are just unwilling to pay full price for low value. If this made you rethink your own quietness, I would genuinely like to hear what kind of silence you prefer in the comments, the comfortable kind or the defensive kind. And the next time someone tries to pull you into small talk, remember this. Silence is not emptiness. It is you refusing to waste meaning.